and welcome to our talk. It's a pleasure to be here with you today. I'm going to be talking about creativity and certain elements of the creative process, namely intuition, synchronicity, and spirituality. Because we don't have a very big group, I'm going to make it a completely open presentation. And so I welcome your questions and feedback throughout. And of course, I'm also going to make time at the end for you guys to ask a lot of questions. But if you have questions that come up throughout, please write it in the chat box. And Maddie, our wonderful administrator, is going to alert me of that, because as I'm doing my talk, I probably won't see your questions pop up. I'm Dr. Anna Yusim. I'm a psychiatrist, and my focus within the field of psychiatry is actually the intersection between mental health and our mental processes, as well as the spiritual world. I look at the intersection of the two. And creativity is one of those things that is useful in every single endeavor of the world. It's useful, obviously, in film, art, in writing. That's where we often think of creativity, but it's also incredibly useful in sports, in business, and as a psychiatrist in my therapy practice. So what I'm going to talk to you about today is how certain ways in which I have used creativity with patients. And sometimes those ways are deliberate, but sometimes the way that creativity finds us is we have to get out of the way, or our ego has to get out of the way, and we become a channel, we become open for creative information to come through us. So we will begin now. So where does creativity come from? What are we tapping into when we have a flash of creative insight or develop a brilliant new idea? The answer to this question depends on who you ask. Most scientists will say that creativity comes from your brain. Others may say it comes from the mind. Still others will say that creativity derives from this mysterious space we call the infinite field, an infinite storehouse of consciousness that connects all human beings. Sometimes scientists have gone so far as to suggest that all higher level cognitive processes, like intuition and creativity, arise from our interactions with this field. So how do we as human beings tap into the field? And what does it even mean to tap into the field? Whatever it means, it's something that is believed to be a very important process of us knowing our deepest essence in human beings and being open to creativity coming through us. This is a belief shared by spiritual healers, mystics, shaman, and yogis. Some hypothesize that among the information contained in this field is the blueprint to all ideas, stories, technologies, great works of art, medical breakthroughs, innovations, inventions, and imagination from the past, present, and future. According to this theory, every great idea came from this all-pervasive field. Some individuals are gifted with an exceptional capacity to tap into this field of information, which can result in some rarely seen talents and abilities. An example of this is a very brilliant self-taught math prodigy named Srinivasa Ramanujan. A movie was made about him, which some of you may have seen, called The Man Who Knew Infinity. Srinivasa Ramanujan came from India with almost no formal math education. And despite that, he was considered to be the most innately brilliant mathematician who has ever lived. In his short lifetime of 33 years, he independently compiled nearly 3,900 mathematical works and was eventually discovered and sponsored by British mathematician G.H. Hardy to work and study at Cambridge. How did a man with no formal math training independently compile 3,900 mathematical works? A spiritual man deeply committed to his Hindu faith, Ramanujan said he would receive visions of scrolls of complex mathematical content unfolding before his eyes. In this way, he believed that mathematical equations represented the thoughts of God. Ramanujan therefore believed himself to be a channel or conduit for inspired information in the form of mathematical knowledge. Although Ramanujan's talents were indeed exceptional and may represent a particularly powerful example of tapping into the field, it's long been recognized that strangers in different parts of the world have simultaneously made some of the most important discoveries in science and beyond. This phenomena is so widely acknowledged by the scientific community that it's been named multiple discovery. Oxygen, calculus, evolution, personal computers, and the existence of black holes and the stratosphere were all discovered by scientists working independently of each other. Did two people simultaneously tap into this mysterious storehouse of wisdom, knowledge, and information at precisely the same time? Or is the mechanism of multiple discovery far less mysterious? Given that new discoveries arise from thinking about old concepts in new and innovative ways, it's not surprising that multiple individuals can draw similar inferences from the same set of existing facts. Mysterious or not, multiple discovery is not an aberrant historical event, but a common pattern in science. Likewise, in business, it's widely assumed that the next big idea is out there, waiting to be discovered. The first one who does it becomes a multimillionaire. The idea of tapping into the field for creativity and inspiration is never more present than in the world of art. Artistic creativity can be seen as an act of listening and receiving rather than creating. When a painter is painting or a writer is writing, for instance, he or she may begin with a plan, but the plan is soon surrendered to the artwork's own plan, whereby the brush takes the next stroke or the book writes itself. In dance, writing, sculpture, filmmaking, and any other work of art, the artist is the channel for the creative process rather than its sole and independent creator. The ideas and inspiration for works of art exist just a bit beneath the surface of our consciousness. If we know how to listen, we can tune in and receive the necessary guidance for a higher level of creativity. As artist Julia Cameron writes in her famous book, The Artist's Way, be alert. There is a second voice, a higher harmonic, adding to and augmenting your inner creative voice. The voice frequently shows itself as synchronicity. You will hear the dialogue you need, find the right song for the sequence, see the exact paint color you almost had in mind, and so forth. You will have the experience of finding things, books, seminars, tossed out stuff that happen to fit with what you're doing. Learn to accept the possibility that the universe is helping you with what you're doing. In this way, all forms of creativity, whether mathematical, artistic, scientific, or otherwise, may involve connecting to an infinite storehouse of ideas, wisdom, knowledge, and information. Like Julia Cameron's quote suggests, people connect to this field in many different ways, including recognizing the synchronicity of their lives. Others connect through meditation, intuitive flashes, dreams, premonitions, sometimes even telepathic connections. This type of connection is not something reserved for the chosen few in terms of tapping into the field, but something we can all cultivate and experience if we so choose. So one of the ways of tapping into the field is through intuition. And so what is intuition? Intuition derives from the Latin word intuere, which means knowledge from within. Whether you call it a gut feeling, a sixth sense, or a number of other things like direct access to the unconscious mind, a well-developed intuition is increasingly touted as a superpower. Here's a little bit more about intuition. It's often how you know something without really even knowing why you know. And it's this awareness or a knowledge that's just below your conscious perception. Intuition often will help you answer questions that are among the most important in your life. It's the inner voice that will break through to show us the right way when we are about to make a wrong decision. Using our intuition allows us to access wisdom about our life, of which we may have been completely unaware. This knowledge can only be revealed by looking within. It can sometimes be difficult to distinguish the inner voice of intuition from the inner voice of logic. The voice of intuition is calm, quiet, and peaceful. Its guidance is steady and unwavering. It operates in the service of our inner wisdom rather than being dependent on our moods, thoughts, and emotions. The inner voice is courageous, willing to do what is needed in a given situation despite fear. Some people say that intuition is the whisper of the soul. So I'm a physician and I went to medical school, and I knew all along that I wanted to be a psychiatrist. And the reason I wanted to be a psychiatrist is I wanted to help people to align with and connect with their souls. And boy, was I surprised when, after I got to medical school, I was at Yale, and that's where I'm on faculty now, I realized that the word soul wasn't even used in our lexicon. And so one of my questions as a medical student and thereafter has been, what is the soul and how does it connect to our healing? And part of my study and research has taken me far and wide to better understand and answer this question. It took me to ashrams in India, learning Buddhist meditation in Thailand, learning Kabbalah in Israel, and working with different shamans in South Africa and South America. And my favorite definition of soul actually came from a Mexican shaman named Fernando Broca. His definition of the soul was that the soul has two parts. One part is that which connects us to everybody and everything. And people often say we're one unified soul. That's what they mean. The other part of your soul is that which encapsulates your uniqueness, or your unique set of talents, interests, abilities, what you have brought into the world and the unique contribution that only you can make. And in this way, the soul is these two parts, our uniqueness and our interconnectedness. And so intuition is the voice or the whisper of our soul. Way back in the day, doctors tried to better understand the soul from like a biologic standpoint. And they wanted to know, does the soul have weight? Because everything else has weight. So why wouldn't the soul have weight? And the way that they measured this was they would weigh a person right before and right after they died, because the theory was that the soul leaves the body upon death. The body stays behind, but the soul leaves. And indeed, they found that there was a little bit of a difference. And so this is the article, "The Soul Has Weight, Physician Thinks." So here are a few synonyms for intuition. ESP, the soul's whisper; clairvoyance, precognition, second sight, gut feelings; divination, instinct. And I just want to say one more thing. You can tell a few of them are a little woo-woo, like ESP. And as a psychiatrist, it's very interesting because intuition, as I see it, is one of those things that bridges science and spirituality. You can study intuition very scientifically, but it also is that thing that's difficult to study scientifically precisely because it's so subjective. You can't always reproduce somebody's intuitive hunches. There are three types of intuition. The first type is often referred to as implicit learning or knowledge. And it, in essence, refers to the knowledge we acquired in the past and either forgot or did not realize we learned. In his famous book, Thinking Fast and Slow, experimental psychologist Daniel Kahneman, who was awarded the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2002, describes the cognitive errors we often make as human beings, believing we're using logic, the deliberate, slow thinking system, whereas in fact we're using type 1 intuition, the fast, emotional pattern recognition system he calls instinct. In other words, we often act on instinct, but then come up with ways to justify it to our logical, rational minds as a form of retrospective rationalization. The second type of intuition is subtle energy. And this is the ability of our nervous system to detect and respond to environmental signals, such as electromagnetic fields, like when we know if another person is staring at us, even if we're not looking at them, for instance, or if we know how somebody else is feeling just by being in a room with them, with having no language exchange with that person. Most people tend to think of communication solely in terms of overt signals expressed through facial movements, voice qualities, gestures, body movements. However, evidence now supports the perspective that a subtle yet influential energetic or electromagnetic communication system operates just below our level of consciousness, and that we experience it as a type of intuition that's likely an aspect of empathy. An example of this energetic sensitivity is the sense that someone's staring at us, like I mentioned, And there's several scientific studies that have verified this type of sensitivity, that people know, even people who aren't spiritual or empathic or who don't really have any beliefs or about this, people can still sense when another person is staring at them. Research at the HeartMath Institute is being done to elucidate the way in which different body systems communicate with one another through vibrational processes of resonance and entrainment. The research suggests that the heart is the most powerful biological oscillator within the body, with an electromagnetic field that's at least 5,000 times greater than that produced by the brain. Many people think that the brain rules the heart, but it may actually be the other way around. Because the heart has the most powerful resonance, the rest of the body system can be pulled into entrainment with it. At moments when we enter a flow state or feel in harmony with something else, a glorious sunset, inspiring music, another human being, we are coming into sync with ourselves. Not only are we more relaxed and at peace at such moments, but the entrained state increases our ability to perform well and offers numerous health benefits. People can develop their ability to maintain entrainment or sincere, heart-focused states such as appreciation and love. Many people have been able to cultivate this through regular meditation. Research indicates that energetic information contained in the heart's field isn't only detected by our brains and bodies, but can also be registered by the people around us, which is how we can connect or resonate with people at an energetic level that's outside of our conscious awareness. And the third type of intuition is non-local intuition. And this is the knowledge or sense that something that cannot be explained by the past or forgotten knowledge or environmental signals is somehow being communicated. And so an example of this kind of intuition is when a mother knows that something's wrong with her child far, far away. Or there's been a number of twin studies that twins are so deeply connected that one can sense what's going on in the other, even if separated by a very long distance. So I want to share a few examples from my own practice as a psychiatrist of how this work and these ideas of intuition have come into play in my own life and in my work with patients. So at one point, a few years ago, I was and all the cases, by the way, are disguised because the patients were very kind to let me use these examples, but of course, I wanted to disguise them to preserve their confidentiality. So this particular patient is Hans the violinist. He's actually not Hans the violinist, but for our purposes, he's Hans the violinist. Hans and I had been working together for a few years at the time that this situation that I'm going to tell you about took place. At the time, I was on a trip actually to the Ukraine with the Kabbalah Center of New York City. And I woke up in a start one night feeling that something was terribly wrong. Patients had described experiences like this to me before, waking up and just feeling all panicked. And I realized I was having a midnight panic attack. I've never had panic attacks before, and certainly never a midnight panic attack like this. I felt like something was really wrong, and I felt compelled to check my email. I had checked my email, and a moment prior to my waking, Hans had emailed me telling me that he was feeling suicidal. By virtue of my having woken up, I was able to contact Hans and literally and metaphorically talk him off the ledge. To me, it was an amazing thing that how did I know that something was wrong with my patient while I was 7 time zones and 5,000 miles away? To Hans, it was equally surprising. Thank goodness Hans was okay, but the fact that this happened and we had this incredible connection at such a distance was very, very powerful for both Hans and myself and created a real shift in our treatment going forward. Sigmund Freud, famous psychiatrist, called processes of this nature thought transference or telepathy or thought transference. And he defined these as mental processes in one person, ideas, emotional states, impulses that can be transferred to another person through empty space without employing the familiar means of communication by words or signs. So I'm going to share another example with you. And just to go back, so this is my cat. I'm going to introduce you to my cat who would like to join the presentation. He joins presentations and family and therapy sessions sometimes. This is Bowie. And if I don't pick him up, he's going to just go a little crazy. So we're going to have him here with us. So the example of Hans is an example of type 3 intuition or non-local intuition. This is an example of the second type of intuition, or intuition where we are tapped into each other's subtle energy systems. So I treated a man named Mark, who was a priest. And at the time that this situation that I'm going to tell you about happened, we were about 6 months into our treatment. So I was sitting with Mark, and Mark says to me, and this is, now the majority of my sessions are telehealth, but way back in the day, there used to be such a thing called an office, and you would see patients in your office. So Mark was sitting with me in my office, and he said something to me like, doctor, it just feels like I leave these sessions and I'm just so exhausted. And I just wonder if it's worth it. This work is so hard. And my response to Mark was something like, Mark, I totally get it. And there's probably a part of you who would want this to feel like a massage, that you leave feeling relaxed and great. But oftentimes the more exhausted you feel, it means that you've released something. And the more you release and the harder you work, the more progress you make in therapy and the more freedom you have over your life. So that kind of response, it's not like a crazy response now that I thought, not when I think back to it, except for one thing. If I was deliberately planning a response to what Mark had said, I would never make a metaphor to a massage to a priest. And after the words had left my lips and I had said to him, you might want, therapy to feel like a massage, I thought to myself, why did I just say that? But the words had, whatever came through me. And as soon as I had said the thing about the massage, I also saw a visible change in Mark. Something shifted in his expression. And when I was finished saying what I was saying, he said to me, that's so strange, doctor, that you just said this whole massage thing, because there's something that I've been wanting to tell you that I haven't been able to tell you. And that's actually the real reason that I am here. And it's that I've been going to these massage parlors and, and I feel incredibly guilty about it. So because this strange thing came through me, my making a statement about a massage to a priest, which I never would have done had I been planning this treatment deliberately, Mark was able to have this incredibly catalytic moment in the treatment. And this is something that in so many different therapies has actually been documented. Let's see, over here, by a colleague of mine named Janine Despair. And these are these uncanny communications when actually in the course of therapy, you have a slip, something that you don't mean to say that ends up being a very catalytic moment. And there's about 40 other therapists and psychiatrists who've had similar slips. So this is one of the ways that we're connected to each other. And one of the ways, especially with doctor and patient, because we have this very deep relationship, that this empathic communication can open something up. And to go back to this, a psychologist named Elizabeth Lloyd Mayer wrote a brilliant book about these kinds of communications in her book, Extraordinary Knowing. And she wrote, we cannot reach these new sources of information simply by tuning into something new. Paradoxically, we must also tune out much of the ordinary information that continually bombards our senses. And so as we're talking about creativity and tapping into the field, oftentimes these sorts of things will move through us. We get out of the way and we let what needs to come through us. People, scientists, are always looking to understand the scientific or neurobiological basis for this. How is it that we have these thought transference experience, or these telepathic experiences, or these deeply empathic experiences, whatever you choose to call them? And there's a lot of evidence of people doing research to actually elucidate the scientific mechanism. Some people say that it's a conversation between the limbic system, and the limbic system is your amygdala, which is where all of your emotion is stored. Or it's your right amygdala communicating with the right amygdala of the other person, in the left and the right brain. The left brain is your logical brain. The right brain is the intuitive brain. And then there's also mirror neurons. And mirror neurons are our capacity to be able to mirror what each other is seeing and feeling in each other. So there's a few different neurobiological bases for this. So who is more or less likely to have experiences like that? So individuals with an increased capacity for telepathy usually believe that telepathy is real. They're usually artistic and creative. They have a history of these experiences. They're likely to meditate. They're open to the unknown, and they're generally emotionally receptive. So that's a little bit on intuition. Now I want to talk to you a little bit about synchronicity. So what is synchronicity? Synchronicity is a term coined by Swiss psychiatrist Carl Jung to describe the experience of two or more events that are not causally related or unlikely to occur together by chance, and yet their occurrence together is experienced as meaningful by the observer. For instance, I have a thought about somebody, and then a few minutes later, that person calls me. My thought about that person didn't cause that person to call me, most likely. And yet the fact that that happened, I have a thought about this person, and then that person calls me right away, could indeed be meaningful. Or you have a dream about one of your best friends that you haven't talked to in ages, and then the next day you bump into that person on the street. Did your dream lead to you bumping into that person? No. And yet those things occurring together will probably be experienced as meaningful by you and by many other people. So in his book, Synchronicity, Carl Jung describes a famous story of a gold-green scaraboid beetle appearing at his therapy office window at the exact moment that one of his patients was describing her dream of a gold scarab. He opened the window, caught the insect midair, and presented it to his patient, saying, "Here's your scarab." This beautifully illogical moment resulted in a breakthrough for this woman who'd been blocking her own progress within a wall of logic. Even though the synchronicity was a reflection of Jung's patient's inner landscape, it was simultaneously a synchronistic reflection of a deeper process taking place within Jung. For Jung to be hearing the patient's dream of the gold scarab and to have the gold scarab fly into his office was an externalized synchronistic reflection of an important process that was happening inside of him. It is noteworthy that a synchronistic event can collectively reflect and be mutually shared by more than one person in both similar and singularly unique ways. For Jung and his patient, the shared synchronistic experience was a living experience of being connected to something greater than themselves. A skeptic would argue that this was merely a coincidence, with no inherent meaning aside from that ascribed to it by Jung and his patient. In their search for meaning, Jung and his patient created a magical message of a meaning by combining a series of random events. Jung would say that what made this a synchronicity was not the co-occurrence of these two events, but precisely the subjective meaning ascribed to this co-occurrence. The relatives of that gold-green scarab beetle were no doubt arriving at windows all over town without setting off any emotional breakthroughs in anybody else. It's not the objective events themselves, but what we make of them that counts. So I'm going to share two synchronicities that happened to me, and both having to do with cases of bereavement of individuals I was treating who had just lost a close family member. The first one was a young man who'd lost his girlfriend, actually to suicide. And he was absolutely beside himself and very, very sad. And we had a few sessions and his grief was just overpowering. And he kept wondering, is she okay? And is there any way that I can get any sort of communication with her? And one day as he was saying this, he was saying something to, I wish that she can communicate with us in some way. I had this door buzzer, and the door buzzer fell off my wall. And things falling in an office, not that meaningful, it could happen. But for whatever reason, in my experience, that door buzzer had never fallen off before and has never fallen off since. And the fact that it happened to fall at that exact moment when my patient was asking his question I wonder if she can communicate with us in some way, was incredibly meaningful to him. And to him was a sign that indeed he did still have some form of communication to her, and actually that she was probably okay. So that also created this catalytic moment, which enabled my patient to be able to have some help with his grieving process. A similar example was a young woman who had lost her sister. There was actually 4 girls, and one of the sisters died in a car accident. And whenever she would bring up her sister, the strangest thing would happen. The lights in my office would start to flicker. Now, lights flickering, not that big of a deal. But for whatever reason, they would seem to flicker whenever she brought up her sister. And at first, I didn't say anything. And eventually, she was the one that brought it up. That's so strange. Why does that keep happening? And I'm like, what do you think it means? And she thought that it also had to do with some sort of communication from her sister, or the emotional valence of the communication and us somehow setting off, the lights flickering by virtue of it being such an emotional thing. But one day after that happened, she went home and the same thing started happening with her vacuum. She was vacuuming, and the weirdest thing would happen. The vacuum would start turning on and off in the same way that my lights would flicker. And so her interpretation and our interpretation together was that somehow there was some sort of communication. And once again, it created a shift in the treatment because it enabled this woman to know that her sister was still somehow with her. And so this is a way in which synchronicity can be part of the creative process and also part of a therapy experience. And so by thinking about intuition, by thinking about synchronicity, we can think of creativity really as a spiritual endeavor. And what is spirituality anyways? So one way to think about spirituality, my favorite definition, is actually that given by British professor of religion and theology, Chris Cook. He says that spirituality is a universal dimension of the human experience. It could be intimately inner, immanent and personal, or subjective, but it can also be wholly transcendent and beyond the self. Whatever it is, it's often experienced as being of fundamental importance and concerned with purpose in life, with truth and values. Now, it's important as we consider spirituality, and especially use it in our creative process, to think also about toxic spirituality, because there's also, being kind of at that intersection of mental health and spirituality, I've also seen patients go in directions that aren't very constructive. And here is some examples, and that includes potentially destructive New Age beliefs, and I'll go through some of those, spiritual bypassing, religious or spiritual cults, excessive dependence on psychics and astrologers, so giving away your power, thinking that somebody knows better what you should do with your life than you do, religious and spiritual OCD, and that could be also especially in individuals who are very religious and trying to abide by certain religious rules, but it can go to the point of being OCD and very obsessive and starts to detrimentally affect their life. And of course, religious delusions. So let's talk about some potentially destructive New Age spiritual beliefs. Number one, that you are 100% responsible for your circumstances. You may have heard that. If anybody here is spiritual, they may have heard this as one of these ideas. Now, believing that you're responsible for your life is a wonderful thing, right? You want to feel in control and you want to be accountable. But we don't live in a vacuum. We live in a society that grants different people different levels of power and privilege. Believing that human beings are all equal and therefore equally able to change their lives, unfortunately, does not create a world in which that's true. Instead, it ignores a very real system of oppression and denies the victims of those systems the validation and empathy that could be incredibly empowering to them. Spiritual and self-development leaders who focus only on individual responsibility do so because it's easy. Acknowledging our history and circumstances is a longer, messier process. So number two, the ego is an enemy that needs to be eliminated. I don't know if some of you have heard that as a spiritual belief. So in my work, I see the rise of the term ego as a catch-all phrase for a spectrum of defense mechanisms, emotions, felt experiences, and unmet human needs. In this context, the ego is something to be conquered, which means by extension that all those feelings and needs are potential failings, roadblocks on the path to a more enlightened self. You're encouraged to pit yourself against another part of yourself and therefore overpower it. This can be incredibly harmful, not to mention futile. A more compassionate, healthier response is to try to understand these different parts of yourself and honor all of them. So number 3, reacting with anger is a sign that you need to do more work. And as you can see, all of these things on some level, there's something to them that is, so yes, if you're someone who is lashing in anger all the time, of course you need to do more work. And yet, on the other hand, feeling anger is also not harmful. Neither is sharing the way that we feel. It may make somebody feel uncomfortable, but that doesn't mean it's wrong. We should remain curious about our anger, and anger, especially in the face of injustice, unlocks our empathy and is a very powerful and important feeling to have. So number 4, meditation is a purely beneficial experience. And for many people it is, but I've also seen a number of people who have meditated and gone into deep meditation who have gone a little bit too far and had either psychotic breaks or emergent phenomena come up from which it's very difficult to come back. So there's no doubt, that meditation has many benefits, but it's important to acknowledge that it doesn't work for everyone, and in some cases can lead to distress. For example, asking someone who's experienced a lot of trauma to pay close, sustained attention to their internal experience may thrust them in emotional arousals and flashbacks, and that's just one such example. So number 5, controlling your thoughts, that it's important that you control your thoughts to manifest your reality. So there's no doubt that positive thinking can feel empowering, and it's great to be able to visualize your goals and become more conscious about working towards them. That's all good. But I wonder if we're doing ourselves a disservice if we claim that the universe delivered. Couldn't it be that our own grit, passion, and hard work delivered? We also don't necessarily need to believe that it's always feasible or even necessary to cultivate a positive mindset. If you dislike your current job, you don't want to pretend that you like it in an effort to overcome how you're really feeling. It's often important to be very honest and authentic with where you are, because then you're able to move forward from that space. We aren't one-dimensional. We're complex human beings capable of existing within our current reality and with all of our current feelings while making positive plans for the future. And then the final one, rising above our emotions is a sign of spiritual maturity. And this is actually kind of similar to some of the others, where we don't have to deny parts of ourselves to be spiritual, and we don't have to blame ourselves for being human. In fact, embracing our spiritual side actually means embracing all parts of us, including the messiness of our complexity. Okay, spiritual bypassing. So what is spiritual bypassing, and how can it actually undermine one's progress, one's creativity, one's life? So spiritual bypassing is the practice of denying and suppressing the darkness within by plastering it with sparkly feel-good band-aids. So I think this is a beautiful definition. It's basically a tendency to use spiritual ideas and practices to sidestep or avoid facing unresolved emotional issues, psychological wounds, or unfinished developmental tasks. It's a term that was introduced in the early 1980s by John Wellwood, a Buddhist teacher and psychotherapist who passed away not too long ago. So these are, people can be spiritual bypassing when something comes up, they feel very uncomfortable with it, but instead of going into the weeds, they say, you know what, no, I'm just gonna think positive. So another part of this is toxic positivity. Okay, so this is the psychics and astrologers. I pay for half an hour of escapism in the hope that life might suddenly make sense. Or I don't trust my own instincts, they failed me too many times. I think I'm gonna pay somebody else to tell me what I need to do with my life. And I've had in my practice a number of people with these kinds of interesting addictions to psychics. And so an addiction to psychics is actually an addiction to control. Wanting to have omnipotent control over your future by having somebody else supposedly peek into your future and therefore either quell your fears and worries, or advise you of the right course of action to find joy and avoid calamity. Patients with psychic addictions are often deeply insecure and highly perfectionistic, thereby thinking that somebody else, a so-called expert to whom you fork over some money, has more insight into your life and your future than you do, and therefore is better able to advise you of the best course of action. People who are addicted to psychics cannot tolerate uncertainty and are therefore willing to give over their power and money to others out of fear. And so here's a little bit about religious and spiritual OCD. So this is, and it's called scrupulosity. So individuals who suffer from religious OCD or scrupulosity generally have strict moral, ethical, and religious perfection. They feel easily condemned by what others may consider the simplest standards or guidelines of religion. In addition to feeling extreme guilt by unholy or unclean thoughts and behaviors, a person with religious OCD will often experience symptoms of anxiety and depression, which can be traced to their fear of some sort of eternal damnation or something of that sort. And so here are some examples of this. And this is living in sin, belief of being unworthy of God's love, fear of not praying humbly or sincerely enough, just to name a few. And so a person with religious OCD will have an overwhelming urge to engage in any kind of compulsive behavior that may lead to forgiveness or that will restore good standing. And some examples of religious obsessions also are fear of going to hell, fear of one's own anger, fear of not having enough faith. So what are the implications of all of this for life? I think the basic thing that we take from this is that all processes and higher level processes, including and especially creativity, are complex and multifaceted in nature and are very powerful and important parts of the human experience. Part of this, another implication, is our interconnectedness of human beings, our ability to connect with each other and also to tap into the infinite field of consciousness. There's also limitations of empirical knowledge and the importance of self-knowledge in being able to harness creativity. And ultimately what this creates is a shift from external power to authentic power. External power being power through manipulation, domination over others, control, violence, this victim-perpetrator mentality, to authentic power, which is you learning to be more empathic, tapping into your own intuition, making responsible choices, cultivating faith and forgiveness, and ultimately relinquishing victim mentality. So that concludes my talk for today, and I welcome all of your questions. So Maddie, you're welcome to read the questions or call on people, and I'm going to try to make it so that I could see everybody to be able to see if anybody has a hand raised.
Excellent. And for anyone asking questions, you should be able to unmute yourself as well.
Anna, I just want to tell you thank you so much for your presentation. It's kind of funny, actually. Was it yesterday? I woke up at 6:45 and got this email from my good friend that said, oh, they're having this creativity seminar. And I'm like, oh, what? It starts in an hour and a half. I don't know if I can afford it. Oh, it's free and all of this. And it's been like synchronicity and honoring my intuition. I've just noticed the more I can honor and develop my intuition and trusting and loving myself, that, oh, life is so much more joyous and like allowing for life to unfold. It's been absolutely beautiful. Any other ways to, I don't know, I have an active meditation practice, but I was in ways of continuing to develop those gifts that you can think of?
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jason. I love your comment. And I think that that's absolutely right. The more that we lean into our authenticity, to our intuition, to this way of knowing, to tapping into the field, the more that the world opens up to us, the more we're going to be able to see these synchronicities all the time, just like you're mentioning with all these synchronicities of you ending up here, despite obstacles, right? Here you are. So how can we develop this? There's so many different ways. A meditation practice certainly is one. And the majority of these ways all entail quieting your left brain or your emotional and your rational brain in order to create space for your intuition to speak. And your intuition is that still quiet voice, which can only be heard when the screaming of your thoughts and your emotions temporarily ceases. So there's many ways to do that, obviously meditation being one. Other ways are journaling practices, and especially journaling practices of automatic writing, where you allow something to come through you. So you essentially pose a question to your higher self, and then you set the intention for your ego to get out of the way, and for your higher self or your soul to speak with you in response. So it's you writing the answer to that question, but also often people will feel as though their higher self or almost like another entity comes in and is responding. And that's the way in which the book Conversations with God by Donald Neil Walsh was written, all three versions of it. So you might try that automatic writing. It's kind of a neat little experiment.
It's fantastic. Yeah, I appreciate that. I do a gratitude journal every morning where I look on the past 24 hours and write those things down. And the other thing I noticed I've been a hospice nurse for many years, and I would get, I call it a bubbling up, or like something drops in my heart. And for the longest time, I didn't say anything because I was just so embarrassed. And so now what I do, whether it be a patient, a family member, someone in my life, I'll ask permission first. I was like, I just got something. Do you mind if I share it? And then it gives them permission, to say yes or no. And
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. And this is, all of our different ways of knowing, and there's many different ways of knowing. It's all the different clairs, right? There's clairaudience, where we hear truth. There's clairsentience, where we feel truth. Maybe for you, it's more clairsentience because it seems like you feel it in your body. There's clairvoyance, where you see. People who see, they have a third eye, so they're actually able to see things in their mind's eye. There's audience, clairsentience, claircognizance, where you just know. You don't know why you know, but you just know. So those are some of the clairs, the ways in which you could know. And the more that you are tapped into that, and the more that you listen and respond to it, the more that capacity becomes developed. So it's so beautiful that you're doing that.
And I'm going to hop in here real quick. I think we have time for just about one more. I think Carol McCormick has her hand up. And then for you, are you able to send any website or contact information for anyone in the chat?
Definitely. I'm going to send you my website, which is just my full name.com. And I'm going to also send you my email, which is annayusim@gmail.com. And we'll answer the question that you just said. And there was also an interesting question about when can you trust your intuition? So I'll answer that as well. So what was that? Let's have the other question first.
Well, first I'll say that I often quiet my mind if I'm solo gardening or mowing the grass or walking in nature by myself, and then the intuition speaks more loudly. I have a conflict about charging for spiritual work. My husband and I lead a meditation chanting practice every day, and people have come to me and paid me for psychic readings, and I've stopped doing that because I really want, I've always said when I do a psychic reading, it's a snapshot in time through my filters, and you have to interpret the messages that I'm giving you, and nothing's written in stone and everything. But people can so easily get dependent upon you and not take the little steps to make things happen. They want a magical, quick solution, kind of, or someone else be responsible for their own life. So I've paid to go to seminars and workshops and everything, but I always distrust if it's really expensive or they don't have an option for people to have a scholarship or people that couldn't afford it. Because it seems to me, that we're given these gifts and they don't have a price. You know, it's
Yeah, and Carol, it's such an important point, and I'm going to respond to that in two ways, because I think you bring up so many important points. One is the fact that indeed you have this beautiful gift and you want to give back. You were given this gift, so you want to give back, and being of service, especially selfless service, is one of the most beautiful ways to live your life. And when you are of selfless service, you get so much back in a million different ways. Right? That's number one. So I completely agree, and I'm with you. And then number two is a little bit of a paradox, that the other thing that is so important, especially when you are giving of your talents and abilities to others, is to create a fair exchange where you are being valued fully and they're able to value you, you know, because otherwise it's actually this Kabbalistic concept that happens. When you give without getting the fair exchange, you create what's called bread of shame. So you are giving something to somebody without it being earned, or without it being merited, or without getting the fair exchange for it. And so you don't want to do that either, you know, so you always want to make sure. And of course, it's completely up to you what your price is and how you know, and I think you're exactly right that a lot of spiritual people, they live in this world. They're not necessarily in the material world, nor do they care to be. So scholarships, all these things are wonderful, and yet the fair exchange and knowing your worth is also such an important principle that will only, I think, make the work stronger.
And how I've resolved it is I make my living as a professional storyteller. So it's discovery learning, you know, and people come up to me afterwards and ask questions and things, but I, you know, many times I'm hired as an entertainer, where I'm doing much more than that.
Beautiful. I love that. I love that. Yeah. And there's a few other questions that came up. When can you trust your intuition? I think that the most important thing is to start trusting your intuition as much as you can. And the more you trust it, the more it's going to open up. And don't be fooled, because it's very important to distinguish your heart, your mind from your intuition, right? Your emotions from your reason from intuition. The more that you can distinguish that and align with intuition, the more things are going to start to work out. And even if things don't seem to be working out, or you think that you might have made a mistake, if you trusted your intuition, don't be so sure, because we don't always know what the final outcome is, and we can't always judge. But I think it's so important to really be able to always trust the intuition to the best of your ability.